Greetings and welcome to the Dividing Line. My name is James White. It is, it just dropped below 90 degrees in here, down to 89.7. Whew. We're not on the road yet. I picked the RV up this morning from our storage spot. It's a covered storage spot, but it's still out there in the elements. So the air conditioners are struggling, doing what they can to try to catch up. Probably by the morning, it'll be down to maybe 82, something like that in here. And my first stop on Saturday, I think the low the next morning would be like 57. So, yay, there we go. So we'll get out of the desert heat on Saturday. But anyway, we are doing a program. We make changes each time around, so we're making sure things work. But it also is just the best time to do things. Tomorrow I'll be busy with getting food and getting that in here. You gotta get it set up. You gotta get the refrigerator cold. It's sort of cool right now, but it's not really cold yet and stuff like that. So stuff to do, lots of stuff to do. Big trip coming up, big trip, month long, and we're going to see all of our friends in Nashville next weekend, and then the weekend after that at the Harbor Freight G3. Keith Foskey and the debate, of course, that we'll be doing at that particular point in time on the prologue of John. And then off to Pennsylvania, Chris Arnzen, Iron Sharpens Iron, his pastor's luncheon, and then speaking at the church on Sunday, and then the long trek home. And there'll be some churches on the way. So I'll actually be taking different routes so that we can get to local churches, smaller churches, and minister there. It's always enjoyable to do all of that. I will miss my wife and my family and my kitties. My littlest kitten right now just got neutered yesterday or day before yesterday. And so he's doing well. Thank you very much. We are trying to, Bob Barker kept telling you, get your pets spayed and neutered. So some of you have no idea what I was just talking about. But that's okay. Those who know. Anyway, no, we are certainly doing what we can to slow the growth of the feral cat population. Some people would say we're helping it out a lot because I just don't like seeing starving cats. That's not really enjoyable. So, but anyway, let's not go there. Though I know my wife's not watching, and I've mentioned that we had 5 kittens. Well, actually, I had 6. I'll find the 6th one when I tear the stuff apart in the backyard in October. But we had 5 kittens born in the backyard. I did everything I could to give them an opportunity to survive. Having kittens in Phoenix on June 3rd, bad timing. A little bitty is the mommy, and I guess they don't really think about timing that much. But, I was very proud that in June, it could be 112 degrees in the backyard, and it was 82 in the tarp, the folds of the tarp where she had the kittens. Evaporative cooler, stuff like that. Anyways, they're like 10 weeks old, and they're running all over the place and climbing 6-foot fences and doing all the rest of this kind of stuff. But there's one of them, one particular one, really the cutest one, and the one that's been the most outgoing, and we're pretty sure it's a she. She loves my wife, and she'll come running up to her, and my wife will sit down on the back porch, and she'll just she loves to get petted, and yeah. And I heard my wife saying, I think we need to keep this one. I won't tell you how many that makes, but yeah. I think she's finally embracing she keeps saying, you're going to die and you're going to leave me as the old cat woman. Well, we're the old cat couple right now. So I'll try not to kick off too early. So I'll have to admit, morning feeding and evening feeding takes about 22 minutes with two of us working together. It's mainly because you're trying to herd kittens. Ever tried to herd kittens? It's an interesting and very enjoyable, very, very enjoyable experience. With all the garbage going on in the world, a kitten in your hand purring and doing this number lowers the blood pressure. I bet you if you did a medical study, lowers the blood pressure. Anyhow, people say, "Don't you love dogs?" Yes, but you have to be home all the time. That's the problem. It's my wife helping to take care of her mom, and me traveling. You know, we've had some wonderful dogs in the past, and they're wonderful companions, but cats are just a whole lot more self-sufficient than dogs are. So there you go. So yes, it's still warm here in Phoenix, though I'll have to admit it was mainly overcast this morning. So when we were setting up and things like that, I have sweat much harder than I did today. Let's just put it that way. And I am looking forward to the cooler weather. It's at least some of the first two spots that I'll be at on the trip out are fairly high altitude, and I'm looking forward to feeling some 50-degree, upper 50s, but still 50-degree air. Haven't felt that in Phoenix for quite some time. Anyhow, thanks for being on the program today. There were a couple times over the past few days where I just, again, was highly tempted to set my social media accounts. Really, I only use X anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm on Facebook once in a while, but that's just for the messenger stuff. I'm not a big social media guy, but I do feel the need to be able to keep up with stuff. And X seems to be Twitter was that huge Japanese tsunami. I first learned about it and saw it on Twitter long before the networks had picked it up and stuff like that. So it is an important news source perspective. And a couple times I just felt like setting everything to read only, or nobody can reply, or stuff like that, because at times I really do sense the massive separation that exists between how I was raised. I'm not going to say my generation, because there are young people that have the same set of morals and commitments that I do. But it is somewhat generational in how common it was. A young person having the kind of worldview commitments that I do now would be very unusual. It wasn't unusual when I was a young person. And the willingness and ability to ignore context, I don't even understand what context is, to twist what somebody is saying, to put words in someone's mouth that they actually never said or never intended to communicate what you end up interpreting them as having said. It's just, sometimes it's extremely frustrating to even try to talk with people. A lot of it is we live in a day where emotion has replaced thought and reason. And if someone feels something strong enough, then they feel like that makes it true. And if you question their truth, then you're attacking them or something along those lines. And it's really hard it's hard for me to find the patience to deal with folks in that kind of a context. It really, really is, because I was raised, you became an adult when you controlled your emotions rather than being controlled by your emotions. That was the benchmark. And I understood that as a kid. As a kid, I understood that was what my goal was, that I was to be working toward self-discipline. And that kind of thinking is incredibly rare in the younger generations today. And we see the result with the astonishing degradation of our culture, morality, an understanding of what a nation is, everything. It's all joined together. But what really, a couple things that really got to me. You have the horrific shooting in Minneapolis. I was born in Minneapolis, and I don't even recognize that city or that state any longer. I really don't. Now, of course, I left when I was 5, so that might have something to do with it. But we don't talk about these things as adults anymore. We really don't. What you should hear people saying is, what an astonishing display of evil. Absolute evil. Instead, it's all about sickness and, you just got to ban guns, as if you can ban guns. You just got to do this. But no one will talk about the evil. Now, by the way, I do need to say this. Is anybody else as freaked out as I am by the fact that the day of the shooting, there are pictures of the gun, pictures of the stuff written on the magazine, on the gun itself, kill Trump, all this kind of stuff, and this entire manifesto, including pictures of the manifesto itself, the day of the shooting. How long ago was it that another transgender, violent person killed people, kids in a school? It was only a couple years ago, right? And how long did it take before that manifesto ever saw the light of day? It was like at least 18 months, and there were people fighting to keep it secret and all the rest of this stuff. I'm a little lost. Maybe I'm the only one feeling this way. But is this just the difference between the Biden regime and the Trump regime? That's a massive difference. And again, I sit back and I go, look, with AI, everything that I have seen about the gun and the manifesto and the drawings and all the rest of it, all of that could be produced by AI. How am I supposed to know if that's what was actually written, or what was actually found, or this actually represents what this individual believes? I have no earthly way of knowing. It seems like everyone is united in saying that this was some kind of, again, transgender violence. There doesn't seem to be too much dispute about that. But I'm just left going, these are, okay, it could be the jurisdictions, but this is Minneapolis. This is one of the deepest blue spots on the map anymore. So I'm a little hesitant, to be honest with you. It's still early, but all this stuff just makes me go, I don't know. I'm not sure what to think about the rapidity with which information is ostensibly becoming available this time in comparison to the last time a transgender person. And I did see some quote, again, it's in handwriting, so maybe, 10 years ago, well, there you go. Now, What can you trust? Basically, the individual saying that they had been brainwashed into becoming transgender. So is this a person acting out in anger for having tried to transition, but as we have said over and over and over again, that doesn't work? You can't transition. I'm seeing a cache developing, which is not good. Cache, C-A-C-H-E, which means the feed is not doing real well. And I'm going to try something just for the fun of it here. Oh, I can't change that. Yeah, I can't change the I don't know if it's resolution or just what it is to try to help it catch up. But if it goes to 100, then I'll just shut it off and we'll have to upload the file later and go from there. Nothing I can do about it. It was working fine before, but I don't think it has anything to do with the heat or anything like that. But you're probably getting hiccups along the way. Nothing I can do about it on this end. So anyway, so that has me a little bit concerned. The next thing that happens is I literally have people bandwidth is bouncing around. Yeah, well, could be people coming home from work, all jumping on the local cell site, and it's going down a little bit now. So we'll just keep on going until it chokes. I'm getting messages from Rich here. We are still seeing you. Believe me, that's the least important part of it. I wish there was a way to. I wonder what would happen. I'm gonna try something. Just bear with me a second. I'm still talking. You can still hear me, but I'm just gonna watch the cache thing here for a second, because that's just our graphic. And if you know anything about how video does bandwidth and stuff like that, that doesn't take up a whole lot of bandwidth. It's not moving, and you don't have to show people's mouths moving and that kind of stuff. And I just want to see if it would start catching up, and it is catching up, and it's back. So we may get to see the splash screen. I've never thought of doing that before, but it makes sense. It's logical, isn't it? Although you are a little dark for some reason. I told you that. I was telling Rich when he was setting it up, I was like, have I been out in the sun that much? He's like, looks fine to me. I was like, okay. Anyway, it's all Rich's fault. It is just always is. That's his job. He gets paid for it. The other weird thing that happened, and I do mean weird thing that happened. Evidently this was at a Catholic school during Mass. And so I had a bunch of people saying, well, it's your anti-Catholic rhetoric that causes this kind of stuff. And I'm like, what? Has anyone been more clear on the fact that there is no such thing as transitioning? Has anyone ever been more clear on the biblical teaching that Jesus... I mean, I'm the one that went on the Dr. Drew show, for crying out loud, debating the biblical position on this. So I've been consistent on there is no such thing as transitioning. It's not possible. It's a myth. It's destructive. But you would have to sit here and say that the Reformation is responsible for anything like this. Because we're not talking, when you talk about anti-Catholic rhetoric, do you know the difference between a theologically focused response to Roman Catholicism and the anti-Catholicism of the early 1900s in America? It's a completely different thing. No logical person could make the connection, but trying to find logical people in social media is extremely difficult. So I responded to some people. I said, "What are you talking about?" Because they're like, "You should." I just asked the question: can we now start specifically saying that transgenderism produces violence? I mean, think about it. If you mutilate your own body, you choose to mutilate your own body, how big a step is it from there to mutilating somebody else's body? You're doing it to yourself. You obviously are so disconnected from reality, you'll do it to yourself. Why wouldn't you do it to somebody else? The rebellion, the evil that transgenderism is, can very easily be transmitted and transmuted into something else. And so people are like, you should just be praying for the victims. You shouldn't be, you're sounding like a politician. And it's like, we need to address the fact that our society has become so utterly antagonistic to any kind of meaningful Christian morality, and our law and our society, by the way, happens to be based upon that, whether you want to admit it or not. That was its foundation, and without it, it all comes crumbling down. And that's the whole reason, of course, for the transgender movement. I mean, once the transgender movement and all the other movements associated with the culture of death have their effect, and a culture that did give place to the claims of Christ is gone, then they'll get rid of this stuff because they know it's stupid. They know it is absurd for a culture to invest the kind of money that is invested. I mean, is there anything more absurd in this entire world than to have a man convicted of murder go into prison and claim that he's now a woman, and have the taxpayers, now he should be executed, that's just all there is to it, but we don't have the guts to do that. We don't accept the biblical teaching that there are things worthy of death. And that's a New Testament teaching. Remember what Paul said? If I've done anything worthy of death? He should be executed, but you want a perverse society? We will force the taxpayer, or in our case, we will print more money, devaluing everyone's hard work, to not only mutilate the man's body, but to then transfer him to the women's prison. When I first got married, okay, I was young, but back even in the 90s, could anyone have possibly dreamed of such lunacy, such absolute moral insanity? And yet, that's what we're facing, isn't it? That's where we are. It is. So, that's what I was talking about. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about it. No, we have to. We have to talk. We have to take advantage of these situations and go, look at this. This is evil. It's not sickness. This isn't a disease. This is evil. This has been an explosion of evil. And so, what are the real responses to this? Well, the left doesn't have any. And the right doesn't seem to have any either, because no one will call it what it is. It's evil. So it was frustrating to deal with stuff like that. Similarly frustrating was once the clips from Joel Webbon's appearance with Elijah Schaefer began floating around. First of all, you've got the people for whom Joel can do no wrong, and so they're just like, oh, no problem, this is great, But then, what I've learned repeatedly over the past 10, 15 years, if you want to get people really angry, really upset with you, what you do is you bring to bear, you dare to mention, you dare to even say that the Bible speaks about purity of speech. And of course, speech would be all human communication, and hence would include what you write, type, dictate, whatever technological advancements we might have. The idea that there are biblical standards, that God is our creator, made us to be communicative beings. We communicate with God, we communicate with our fellow man. I talk to my cats all the time, and they understand. It's not that they care. That's the essence of a cat. Have you seen the meme that says scientists have discovered that cats do understand everything we're saying to them and don't care? That's very much the case. We're communicative beings. One of the most horrible things about solitary confinement: no one to communicate with, silence, solitude. It can break many people. And so, and we're the only ones that can do that. Yeah, there are some apes that you can develop a small vocabulary and things like that. But apes, outside of the movies anyways, will never write Shakespeare. I happened to fire up, hey, it's barely 4 months to Christmas. I happened to fire up, well, actually it's just less than 4 months. Woo, all right. Handel's Messiah. And I was listening to the overture, the opening movement. And I was thinking to myself, some of the most beautiful music that has ever been produced. And it's cosmically beautiful. Remember when I asked Dan Barker, the atheist who's a concert level pianist. Remember when I asked him, and it was the one thing that threw him big time. I asked him, if you really are just cosmic broccoli, and if all you are is fizzing chemicals that will eventually just stop fizzing, will your music be objectively beautiful 1 minute after you stop fizzing? And the imago Dei part of him just really couldn't bring himself to say, yeah, have no meaning at that point. And so you listen to Handel's Messiah and you're just transported. Yes, the words in those, but even the opening overture, just fantastic. God made us able to do that. With capacity and ability comes responsibility. And it astonishes me that I would say to people who claim to be Christians that, you click on their thing and there's the bio and Christian, father, husband, maybe even, saved by grace or something like that in the bio. But if you go, well, wasn't it really obvious that what was going on that program was ungodly, crude, vile, misogynistic. I mean, truly misogynistic. I mean, that like racism is a term that's so absurdly overused that it doesn't really have any meaning to it. But this was truly misogynistic. Some of the things were said. Now, I was thinking about the times that John MacArthur went on Larry King. And just the poise that he had, the command of, righteousness. I don't think John would have ever gotten himself into the situation that Joel Webbon got himself into, because it would just be so predictable. There have been shock jocks for a long time. Well, I used to be on frequently with a shock jock, Tom Likas. He eventually ended up in LA. And yet, even when I was on with him, that was long ago enough that the language and stuff, this was before the internet and stuff like that. So there were real limitations as to what Tom could say. But even then, I simply didn't allow the degradation of the subject that I could tell Tom would like to have had happen. And so, I made the point, I think on the last program, if I recall, that this was in regards to Nick Fuentes, who Joel Webbon described as a political savant. And again, I'm like, Jesus said, and in fact, this is interesting. I was looking this up. I'm having problems with how small my screen is here. Jesus said, the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart, more than once. And I hadn't recognized, I hadn't remembered until this afternoon when I was looking the text up for the program, that he used that phrase in two very, very different contexts. In Matthew chapter 12, rebuking Jewish hypocrisy, the Jewish leaders. He said, Matthew 12:34, you brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. So, why is hypocrisy, spoken hypocrisy, such a sin? Because you're seeking to mask what actually fills your heart. The words you're speaking don't actually represent the reality of your heart. You're lying. When politicians say one thing in front of the cameras, and then, how many times we had the open mic situation where they don't know there's a hot mic nearby, and what they say to one another and what they say to the cameras, two completely different things, completely contradictory. They're professional liars. That's what their job is. And that's what Jesus is saying here. But that's not the normative context, because many years ago, I memorized Luke 6:45, where Jesus says, the good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good. And the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil, for his mouth speaks from the abundance of that which fills up and overflows from his heart. Now, what's significant about that is if you have the same phrase from Jesus in two completely different contexts, what that tells you is this was something Jesus said repeatedly. This is a uniquely Jesus statement that he applied to a number of different things. And so what Jesus is teaching us is that how you speak is one of the clearest indications of what is in your heart. And of course, what's in your heart determines who you are. And of course, speaking, typing, texting, whatever it might be, it represents your heart. So, can there be Pharisaical, hypocritical, puritanical standards of speech? Yeah, sure. I grew up in a context, I'll be honest with you, okay? It's down to 87. Woo-hoo-hoo! 2 degrees. We enjoy little things on the desert floor of Phoenix, Arizona. That's not 87 outside. It's 87 inside. This one isn't connected up to the outside one. I'm not sure what it is outside. But anyway, when I grew up, have you ever heard the phrase, "I'll wash your mouth out with soap"? I was threatened with that many times by my parents, especially my mom. And there are a number of words that now we would go, really? But I was absolutely not allowed to say them. I will say one right now. Ready? Cover your ears. Darn. Darn. Yeah. Darn was a cuss word in my house. You couldn't say it. And anything more than that, couldn't say darn. And darn, of course, is the milquetoast version of something more, like Hoover. So I knew lots of kids my age that were very proud of the fact that they didn't say those words around their parents, but they did around everybody else. So can there be a Pharisaical? Yeah, sure, fine. Doesn't change anything about what Jesus said at all. Just because someone might hide behind something, that doesn't change anything. Does not change the fact that Jesus spoke these words. The mouth speaks out of the abundance of the heart. It's a tremendous indicator. And then you have in the book of James, this I think is the longest single diatribe on one subject. And probably why James isn't the most popular of the New Testament books for people to preach from. Do not, many of you, become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we will receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man. You know what? There you go. Despite well, here we go. We can get rid of that. There we go. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the entire body as well. Please note the connection. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, in word and logo, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the entire body as well. So if you can't control the tongue, you're not going to control the rest of your body. Now, if we put the bits into the horses' mouths so they will obey us, We direct their entire body as well. Look at the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, they are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot wills. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. Behold how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, the very world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of our existence and is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a fountain pour forth from the same opening fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, produce olives, or a vine produce figs? Nor can salt water produce fresh. 12 verses. And what is he talking about? The tongue, the tongue, the tongue. It's a small part of the body, yet it boasts of such great things. What we do, what we say. The scripture speaks much of it. But we live in a day where, again, emotion overrules everything else. If it feels good, say it. If it expresses your heart, say it. There is an amazing, it's almost, it seems to me that amongst some of the younger generation, it's almost like they know the boomers talk about this, so we're going to go the opposite direction because we hate the boomers. And I've seen that as well. That's another thing. I had a couple people, before they were blocked, send me some, and again, it was normally, has nothing to do with what I was talking about, or again, I was quoting a Bible verse and, but you people are so evil. And there are people that they hate boomers. They hate an entire generation. How demented do you have to become to hate a generation? How can you not recognize that, my generation is made up of the good, the bad, and the ugly, like every other generation is? How can you not see that? How can you become so consumed? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. Look at what's going on with Jews right now. Look how many people. I mean, I block them every day. Every day on X, I'm blocking. If you could just see, it's the Jews. It's the Jews. They're behind everything. No. It's a mental disease with some people. It just becomes their everything. And I've met people like that who, if it wasn't the Jews, I've often commented that I was glad that the Lord expanded our apologetics ministry, because we started off just dealing with Mormonism. And so I met people, and Mormonism was everything to them. And they could see the Mormons behind everything. The Mormons had control of everything. And I'm like, no, they don't. I mean, yeah, we need to reach out to the Mormons. Yeah, you got to do a good job of it, have a good apologetic, but they're not behind everything. And so you see people, they just become fixated. That's all they can see. They can't hear reason any longer at all. And so you run into this kind of stuff. And as a result, they're boomers. They're all evil. The Jews, they're all evil. Blah blah blah. And you really have to sit back, try to remind yourself, social media produces a magnification of everything, the good and the bad and the evil. You can't contextualize stuff real well in social media. Most people don't even try to contextualize stuff in social media. And yeah, you have to try to remind yourself of that. It's not the real world. It influences, for the good or the bad, the real world. But that's the way it is. But still, it can be really, honestly, disturbing. Very, very disturbing to see this kind of stuff. So, I dared to make some comments about the foolishness of a Christian thinking that you can associate yourself with rebel sinners, and that they somehow are not going to eventually turn on you. There is a tweet, and it's getting older, so I'll try to get this in the last 13 minutes. It's from a week ago today. Again, it's from Joel Webbon. And it brings up some important stuff that I think needs balance and needs a response. He's responding to somebody, I guess. Islam doesn't kill the soul. Are you serious? And you're a Christian? Islam sends souls to hell by the millions every year. Oh, I agree. Wake the hell up, I'm quoting him. It's not the 1600s anymore. Here's where, once again, Joel didn't go to seminary. And Joel admits to LARPing being a pastor. Well, now he's LARPing having the background to be able to seriously address things in church history. And it didn't need to be this way, but he's doubled down on it, so I've given up trying to warn him about it. But listen to what he says. It's not the 1600s anymore. The reformers, by the way, that would be the 1500s, but the reformers of whom I love and cherish, okay, live in a world where Christendom ruled the day. We live in a day where Christendom is but a faint shadow of her former glory, barely on life support. Now, Christendom ruled the day. So, a few centuries before, we had the pornocracy, the utter degradation of the papacy, but then you had a amazing recovery to where you have rulers, emperors, groveling at the feet of the Pope. You have battles where the papacy is fighting for supremacy against the Holy Roman Empire or against the King of England or King of France or whatever else it might be. And the use of the interdict. Oh, the interdict, where the Pope would say to all of the priests in a particular nation, you cannot work the sacraments. You can't baptize babies. You can't do last rites. You can't do marriages, because the leader of that nation is in rebellion against me. And so we're withdrawing God's means of grace. This was Christendom. Okay? This is Christendom. You had the Pope riding through the streets of Rome in his armor, leading his armies in battle. This is one of the things that so scandalized Luther when he walked to Rome from Germany in 1510 was he saw the Pope riding through the streets of Rome in battle armor. This is Christendom, where ignorance ruled and the gospel was almost extinguished. Not totally, but the vast majority of people, their knowledge of what was in the scriptures was mediated to them by stained glass windows and 5-minute long homilies. So much for growing in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. This was Christendom, where Christians slaughtered Christians in the name of Christ, where the gospel was not central, but the state was. This is Christendom. And this is what Joel calls glorious, but a faint shadow of her former glory, barely on life support. There were no, I'm sorry, Joel. There were no Muslim hordes turning hundreds of cathedrals into mosques when Christendom was ruling. This is why it's best to take church history and then not sleep through it. Again, anyone even slightly familiar, maybe like read a book on the Reformation, the period before, during and after, I don't think he's going to remain one very long, but Joel claims to be a Baptist, and maybe if he knew something about his history, he might understand that Anabaptists were particularly despised, especially prior to Munster and thereafter, but for this particular reason, because Europe had to be united, Christendom had to be united to do what? To fight the Muslims. Does Joel not know what happened in Constantinople in the middle of the 15th century? Does Joel not know of the battles? When quote-unquote Christendom was ruling, Christendom was barely hanging on at that particular point in history. And to say there were no Muslim hordes turning hundreds of cathedrals into mosques. Again, Constantinople, now Istanbul. Ever heard of Hagia Sophia? Yeah, okay, well, anyway. When Christendom was ruling, you see it, power, ruling. Of course, Christendom could never really keep from fighting itself constantly. How many religious wars in Christendom? There was no nation state of Israel with Jews doing everything in their power to start World War III when Christendom was reigning. Well, okay, if that's what you think's going on, but tells you, anyway. There were no drag queen story hours with tens of thousands of sodomites attempting to indoctrinate your children and weaponize the state to take them away from you when Christendom was radiant. Of course, there was a great deal of secret homosexuality amongst the clergy, who were the leaders of Christendom, but we don't need to really point that out. Because if Christendom was ruling, reigning, radiant. Catholicism was the dominant threat of the Reformers because it was the only threat to the Reformers. Really. They never had any internal battles, and we can ignore the Muslims, and yeah, that stuff that Calvin was doing with heretics and defending the Trinity, and they were all just a bunch of, well, they weren't really Catholics. They weren't Catholics or Protestants, were they? No. Yeah, no, there were all sorts of other battles they did, but we can, I guess, ignore that or just don't study church history, I guess. Catholicism was the dominant threat of the Reformers because it was the only threat to the Reformers. Well, it was the Matrix. in Europe, out of which the Reformation grew. That's obvious. Our confessions of faith are not understandable if you don't have a background understanding of Roman Catholicism as it existed in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. But now we are crushed by Jewry. Well, maybe you are. I'm not. Islam, secular humanism, gay race communism, crony capitalism that makes it to where your children will never own a home, and on and on and on. This is part of the rhetoric that this brand of Christian nationalism is using. Throw a bunch of stuff together, ignore the vast differences, origins, worldview clashes. Don't worry about how disjointed all of this is, but make sure your children are not going to be able to afford a home. That has something to do with Roman Catholicism? Something to do with Christendom? Something to do with old form Christendom versus some new form Christendom? Really? You really thought this through? Have you taken the 10,000 hours it takes for this one? Doesn't sound like it to me. But it's rhetoric. That's what it's meant to inflame emotion. I want my children to be able to have a home, so those nasty Jews and that nasty Islam. Okay. And to top it all off, millions upon millions of our children have been slaughtered in their mother's wombs. So if you really want to get the big emotional impact here, throw in abortion while you're at it. Does it have anything to do with what we're talking about? Well, yeah, we want Christendom. We want a Christian world. Great, so do I. How do you get it? Well, you don't do it the way you guys are doing it. And you don't do it politically. And you don't do it by going on programs with foul-mouthed people who don't know anything about the gospel and do not have a Christian worldview and do not bring the gospel to bear. So you've got the gospelless Christian nationalists, and then you've got Christian nationalists who say the only way this ever happens is by regeneration. And those are the people Stephen Wolf mocks, who also was at Joel Webbon's conference just a few months ago. So there you go. And you pick Catholics as your arch enemy? Did your parents not teach you shame? Did you even bother to find a professor to teach you church history and logic, Joel? You pick Catholics as your arch enemy. What are the key issues? What are the key issues with Roman Catholicism defined the Reformation? And then identify them and watch how these guys downplay all of these things. They have to. It's inevitable, absolutely inevitable that they will do so. And even if they don't go all the way, many of their followers will. They'll follow the logic. They'll follow the logic. If Christendom is this great big thing, and we've had it before, there's only one way to get it back now. And that's with Rome. So that's already people on that road that they have kicked the door open for and said, hey, this is the way to go. But what are the key issues? And again, without Christ, Christendom is just dumb. Take Christ out of Christendom, then you're left with dumb. And if that's the case, then without the gospel, you have no conversion. You have no conversion. You have no Christendom. You have empty religiosity. And that's what these people want. It's better than what we got right now. Really? Will it send more or less people to hell? Is God glorified more or less? I mean, I still don't understand the thinking. It's desperation thinking. This is terrible. We got to do something. And God's not doing it fast enough. So we're going to do it our own way. If Calvin and Luther were here today and briefed on everything that has occurred in the last 500 years since they were gone, Rome would be so far down their list of concerns it wouldn't make the top 50. You know, Joel, if you had any standing whatsoever as having demonstrated serious ability and competence in theology and church history, then maybe I might listen. But you haven't. And you're the one who keeps telling us that. What did you call yourself? It was some kind of retard or something? I forget what it was you described yourself as. I mean, this was long after you said you're the best we've got, but you've said it. You've admitted, I don't know any of this stuff. And yet you'll make conclusions like this? You think you know enough about Luther and Calvin? I mean, I think they'd probably come to different conclusions, but you think you've done the 10,000 hours of reading in Calvin and 10,000 hours of reading in Luther to make that kind of conclusion? Or at least maybe 10 hours reading a decent church history text? Maybe, possibly? Don't think so. I will defend the Protestant faith. We'll see. We'll see. I will defend the doctrines of grace. Not an Elijah Schaefer's program, you know. I'll defend the gospel of Jesus Christ, but you won't proclaim it to somebody who needs to hear it. I just wasn't the context. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Absolutely, yes, it was. There were so many times. Those women are just a bunch of beep. Elijah, no, they're not. They're made in the image of God, just as you are. And you are called to respect them as fellow image bearers of God. And you need to understand, Jesus Christ does not approve of what you're saying. How tough was that? Well, it would have been the end of the program. Exactly. Ding, 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 ding. If that's what it takes, then do it. Do it. But, and here's where it really comes down to. Any Catholic who is willing to lock arms with me to stare down the coming hordes of demons will have my aid. Your staring at someone, Joel, is meaningless. If you've got coming hordes of demons, there is only one power that has been given to you, and you once knew what it was. Now it seems to be, now your power is locked arms with people who deny the gospel. Who could have seen that coming? I predicted it, and you know it. The Reformed today are like dogs chasing a car. We wouldn't even know what to do if we caught it. What? They're like people dressing up and reenacting the Civil War, the true epitome of LARPing, chasing a mouse while their own children rest in the jaws of lions. Oh, this is great rhetoric, has no meaning. You've not made any connections here. The Reformed tradition will always be my home. I don't think so. But today's Reformed ghetto is like a noose around my neck. Ever purity spiraling, perpetual losers. I don't know. I suppose one hope I could have is his knowledge of the Reformed world is so shallow that maybe if he were to find out how deep it actually is, then maybe he wouldn't go on the trajectory he's going. But those don't sound to me like the words of someone who is going to be staying in that Reformed ghetto. Okay? But there is no Reformed ghetto. When you won't do the work to actually understand your profession, don't blame that on the profession. That's your fault. You said you were LARPing a pastor for years. You're still at it. You're still at it. What you need to do is you need to step aside, get out of the limelight, spend the necessary time. We're not talking a couple months, we're talking years. To get grounded, find out what's what. Then great. See what you have to say then. But this is the kind of, anyway, I just thought that was a very, very, I'm not sure that he meant it to be quite as insightful into where he's really coming from, but you need to understand, he's giving voice to what a lot of other people are thinking. And as such, we need to be aware of where these people are going. So there you go. Okay. Oh, hey, we're cashing out anyways. So I'm going to find the exit button here and get ready to get going because we're cashing out. Thanks for listening to the program. Next time we'll be on the road. Pray for the trip. Help us get there. Appreciate it. Thank you, and God bless.